Welcome to the channel. This is my Schmidt-Rubin 1889, and I'm kind of done with it, and I thought I'd do a quick post-mortem before all this disappears into the ravages of time and I forget all about it. A quick introduction to the firearm itself. I mean, first of all, this thing is huge. It's 130 centimeters from front to back. It feels almost like a musket. It is massive. It's a straight pull. So over here we have the action. You basically pull that back, and it rotates the barrel bands in the rear, the locking lugs in the rear. You can even see them. And then when you push it in again, the gun is ready to fire. Over here you have the safety, kind of like that's actually the firing pin. Then you have a magazine. Over here is a magazine cutoff lever on my gun that already has been disabled. I don't think that lasted very long, the idea of a magazine cutoff. And then going forward, you have battle sights to 300, 400, and so on and so forth. In the front, see, you still have a little stacking rod over there. There's your muzzle, what have you not. Barrel is massive, long thing. I should very quickly add that you look at this gun and you think, wow, that's almost like a modern gun. It's 7.5 by 53.5 caliber. That sounds like stuff I understand. I can load and shoot for this. The problem is that this was kind of like one of the first guns that went smokeless, and they really hadn't got it quite right at the time. The locking lugs for the bolt are in the rear, and they had problems with that, and the action actually turned out to be quite weak. And so really this is your first warning sign that if you want to shoot this thing, you really have to be careful. And this is not easily to be confused with the 7.5 by 55. The 7.5 by 55 can take a lot more pressure. This thing can't. And with that, a whole lexicon of reloading goes. It's no good looking for cratered primers on this thing, because I don't think you'll ever have that. By the time you have cratered primers, the action on this thing is broken, or the lugs are mush, or the whole thing has failed and flown you away, you know. And so you really have to be careful with trying to make this thing shoot. This particular firearm is an obsolete caliber. It's a section 58.2, which means that ammunition for it isn't readily available, and therefore you can just possess this the same way that you can possess a flintlock or a matchlock, you know, kind of like just obsolete. It's a wall hanger. I got it home, I wrote my firearms inquiry officer a letter. I asked for this to be put on section 1, and when I got my ticket back, I asked for some ammunition. I don't think I put much down, and maybe like 100 rounds. And when it came back, the journey started on how to make this thing shoot. Now I'll read you out a little passage, and then we'll get in it. But before I'll do that, I'll read out the riot act. This is a story of what I did. And this is a story of what perhaps I kind of did wrong as well. But it's not a guide. It's just for amusement of those that watch it. If you are thinking of making one of these things shoot, you could consider what I'm doing perhaps as mood music to kind of like theories of, you know, that you might decide to work on. But it's not a guide. Don't do what I do and expect it to work, and don't do what I do and think you're doing something safely, because you're almost certainly not. And I will read you this passage out of what ought to be your starting point, which is Cartridges of the World. Now, they don't actually have a section for the 7.5 by 53.5. They've kind of amalgamated it under the 7.5 by 55, which is the modern Swiss cartridge, which runs at much greater pressures. But the first paragraph is interesting. The first Swiss 7.5 cartridge was adopted in 1889 for the Schmidt-Rubin straight pull rifle of the same year. The original loading used a 0.299 inch diameter, 213 grain paper patch lead bullet and a charge of 29 grain of semi-smokeless powder. Muzzle velocity was 1,977 70 feet per second. Later, a steel-capped hollow-base lead bullet was used, followed by a 190 grain copper or iron-jacketed round-nose bullet with smokeless powder. Loading. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of what you're dealing with here. You have a heavy bullet and a powder grain charge of 29 grains of an unspecified powder. You have to see this comes just after they use black powder. As a matter of fact, the 7.5 by 53.5 round originally used a copper jacketed bullet with a compressed black powder, I think. So you're just off the cusp of the modern rifle. I had a huge problem right out of the box, and the problem that I had is I couldn't find a 213 grain bullet, and I certainly couldn't find it in 0.299 inch diameter. And I decided, I actually swaged this barrel. I can't remember what I got, but I decided that I would be quite happy using a 308 bullet. I don't remember my reasoning exactly, but I just went with a 308 bullet. And the second problem I had, which is much graver, is I didn't have the weight. The best I could find was a 175 grain SMK Sierra Match King boat tail. And the reason for that is that at the time in the UK we weren't allowed to have expanding rifle ammunition. The brass I made, this is box standard 7.5 by 55 brass, which I then trimmed to length for the 53.5. Theoretically, dimensionally, the 7.5 by 55 and the 7.5 by 53.5 should be more or less identical, but with a 7.5 by 55 brass, I got light strikes. I didn't get them often, but I got them occasionally. And that is not something I got once they were fire formed. So make of that what you want. But what I would do is I would fire form them. After that, I would only neck size them. You have 29 grains with a 213 grain paper patch bullet at 100 at touching 2,000 feet per second. And if we look at the Sierra Match King book for the 7.5 by 55, and obviously you shouldn't be using this data because this is running at entirely different pressures. Yeah, so the 7.5 by 55 data is useless to you in theory, and the people online, they all draw equivalencies to 30-40 Krag and what have you not, but I don't know, I thought that was a bit weak, so I drew my own little equivalency, and I'll read out the following, which is for the 7.5 by 55 load data, which you shouldn't use, but they have a 200 grain SBT bullet, and for IMR 3031 using 33.8 grain, they have 2,100 feet per second as their lowest loading. Now, if you remember what we have over here, here we have a slightly heavier bullet, 213 grain, shooting 29 grains of semi-smokeless powder, giving you a muzzle velocity of 1,970, and I felt that was actually pretty close. And so my first load, because I was using a lighter bullet, I felt reasonably safe going with 33 grains, which is below the lowest loading for this. I went to the range, and I have to say I actually wore a body armor, and I wore a helmet, and I had gloves, and I had glasses, and all like that. But bit of a frightening experience, and I aimed and I fired, and that went great. That was fine, problem free. The only problem that I had is I got a lot of blow-by. If you think about it, you're turning a powder into a gas and you're using that to propel a bullet down the barrel. Well, in my case, some of that gas came back, and it came all the way back through the action and boof into your face. The problem that I was having is that I wasn't obturating. If you have a look at this case over here, you can see it's a little dirt. This is actually one of my later loading, in which for whatever reason it didn't seal very well. The neck over here clearly didn't expand enough to provide a good seal, and so some of the gas blew back at you. On a modern rifle, the throat is just, it's just a hole running all the way through with the rifling, and so you engage the rifling and you're straight off. On these it's meant to be more of a funnel. And so when you're firing, you're round rather than immediately the rifling engages. You kind of float a bit, and then slowly the rifle grips. And of course, that was a problem that was made even worse by the shape that I was using. So if you have a look here, this round is going to engage and seal much quicker than this round, because this bullet here has to travel quite a bit further before you have the same thickness at the other one. And it's that original pressure spike that you're looking for to expand the neck of the brass out so you wouldn't get blow-by. With the 175s, I was not having a lot of luck. And what I did, the only option really that I had, was to increase the charge. And in retrospect, I actually think that was too hot. Now, I got my obturation and I stopped the blow-by, but I didn't feel comfortable making that my standard sort of shooty round, so I only shot 2 or 3 rounds. And then that was it. I decided that was all a little bit too dodgy. I was worried about the pressure I was subjecting the rifle to. Remember, the locking lugs on this gun are in the rear, and even when this gun was first put into service, they were having problems with the locking lugs and with pressure. And so I thought to myself, this isn't safe. I didn't consider it safe, and so I kind of ended my journey there. But then something very positive happened. The law changed. We were allowed to use expanding heads, like this 220 grain Pro Hunter in 308, and that was a bit of a game changer, because all of a sudden I would expect that to seal much quicker, and it was also a heavier bullet, much more akin to the 213 grain paper patch lead bullet that the original cartridge used. And with that, I went back to the original foundations, and I had a look back in my Sierra Match King book, and for a 200 grain SBT 33.8 grains of IMR 3031, I got 2,100 feet per second, which matched reasonably well with this. So I used a slightly heavier bullet, and I dropped the load a little bit, and I went with 32.5 grains of IMR 3031. I started off with 32, and that worked. Sitting here now, and I've taken this gun off ticket again because, with COVID, I kind of got bored of it, and I'm ready to shoot something new. One of the problems that I'm having with this gun is that I'm not getting accuracy. I'm getting accuracy at 300. I'm not getting accuracy. And even at 100, you get kind of like plate size. Which I guess is okay, but it's got good rifling. It's got a shiny bore. It's the rifling is sharp. I kind of feel it ought to do better. And if I had my time again, given that the original load was 29 grain of semi-smokeless powder, that suggests to me that the original powder they used was faster than the IMR 3031. And remember, I already used the IMR 3031 because I didn't... If you have a long barrel, in theory you want to use a nice and slow powder, because with a nice and slow powder, you're building up the pressure, and you can get a good velocity at less strain to the gun. The other thing that always intrigued me was the hollow base lead bullet that they used. If you have a look, this is a 41 long Colt hollow base bullet, which has a lead skirt in the rear. I'd be up for casting a bullet which was a hollow base, and that way when you fire it, you're going down that funnel. The lead skirt would immediately arch out and engage, and just, I think it would do a better job of keeping the pressure. The other obvious choice here, of course, is to paper patch. But the trouble with that is you have to see they paper patched a 299 inch diameter, 213 grain lead bullet. And this guy here is a 308, so you'd have to make a custom form, a custom mold for a 299 inch diameter. I don't know. I'm not sure how you do that. But that could be an idea, that you go back to kind of like a hard lead bullet with a paper patch in the rear and you load that up. That could also be good. Anyway, but my journey's come to an end. I've taken this gun off ticket now. I'm just gonna use it as a wall hanger, put it in a corner somewhere, and that's it. The cases that I have left, I'll probably put I'll put a 220 grain soft nose on that, and I'll probably flop those in the shop to my analog for the 7.5 by 53.5. The closest I can get. I know the head stamp is wrong, but I was never able to track down any real old antique 7.5 by 53.5 ammo. I would have liked to have had a look at that. So anyway, those are my thoughts, my musing. As ever, this is not load data. This is just some guy in a shed messing around, and you should really come up with your own stuff. And if it goes wrong, don't blame me. So I'll leave it there. I hope that was interesting, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.